Mindfulness is meant to be how we live. And the beauty is, the magic is, the more in doesn't matter what, will always eventually take you to the root of yourself. Mindfulness uses this brain to help manage the next few.
Let's talk about smart longevity strategies. As a Gen X mum, founder, and podcaster, my days can be long and demanding. That's why I love learning about longevity and cellular wellness breakthroughs that work hard and smart. Time Capsule by Melrose Future Lab is the first TGA-listed all-in-one longevity supplement. It combines 12 clinically backed ingredients in one daily formula to support energy, metabolism, cognition, cardiovascular health, bone strength, and antioxidant protection. Powered by Lipisperse and Verisperse for enhanced absorption, it includes niacinamide riboside for cellular energy, resveratrol antioxidant defense, and berberine to support glucose metabolism. Plus essentials like activated B vitamins, magnesium, vitamin D3 with K2. Because real longevity is not just about one thing. It's sleep, nutrition, mindset, and yes, supplements. It's about everything working together. Time Capsule makes it simple. Today's guest is someone who's not only studied mindfulness, he lives it, he breathes it, and teaches it with scientific precision and soul. Manish Mallas, known as the Modern Monk, is a neuroscience-informed mindfulness teacher with a lineage that traces back 2,500 years to the time of the Buddha. He's also the creator of the Modern Monk Method, a practical, evidence-based and emotionally resonant mindfulness framework taught at Gwingana Lifestyle Retreat, where Manish has helped thousands of guests rediscover awareness, clarity and compassion. From evolutionary biology to ancient wisdom, and from opera singers in New York to wellness leaders in Australia, Manish has spent decades redefining the craft through the mind. His daily practice method is both profound and practical and designed to help you show up fully. In this conversation, we explore the mind-body connection, the science of emotion regulation, and how to move from reactivity into transformation. Whether you're burnt out, seeking deeper presence, or simply want to lead your own mind rather than follow it, this episode is a roadmap for awakening. I'm so delighted to welcome Manish Mallas. Manish, this is such a joy for me to have this conversation. When you spoke at the Ageless Radiance Club event at the Carlisle Hotel last year, the feedback on that session was so emotional. People just wanted to hear more from you. They wanted to be in your presence. They absolutely loved what you had to say about mindfulness, stillness, taking responsibility and learning ability to kind of change states through breath, through the mind. And I'm really excited to have a deep dive into some of your skills and your history today.
Oh, great. Me too. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So you come from a very exalted line of, family line, directly descendant of the Buddha.
Directly descendant of people who were right next to the Buddha.
Yes, you're absolutely right, because it was your descendants that were part of his final rites.
That's right.
Is that correct?
We organized them. That's true. Exactly.
And so where are you from? Where did all of this happen? And how did you get to be the mindful monk today?
Yeah. Good question. So you're right. If you look at the old ancestral history, there was India at the time, I'm from India, is where I was born, but I grew up in California, so hence the accent, which I think is still there a little bit. So India at that time, North India, was a whole bunch of little republics, not any one big nation or whatever. And there was one called the Mallas Republic, which is the
you
Mallas.
Had your own republic. I love that.
Exactly. Well, I didn't quite have it, but they had it. Small and inconsequential, but the thing that put it on the map, and so there's like a wiki entry about it now and all this, because the Buddha died while he was walking through that republic, that land. And they were students of his anyway. They knew him, as did all the rulers of North India. And so he died there, so it fell on them to do the funeral rites. So there's a little town in North India in the ancient name of it was Kushinagar, which is one of the 4 holy sites of Buddhism, where he was born, enlightened, that kind of stuff. This is where he died. And my family to this day, the ancestral home is still in what is the still living town a couple of K away. They haven't moved from that place in 2,500 years.
That's extraordinary. And, there's a lot of science around cellular memory and epigenetic of your ancestry, your history. Yeah. And there's a lot of conversation around trauma that's passed down from generation to generation. But how extraordinary to have this experience, this honor passed down from generation to generation. And it must sit with you. It must have informed your destiny in some respect.
Yeah. You're giving me goosebumps with your line of questioning, but you're absolutely right. We talk about the epigenetics, and as you say, very often in the deleterious, the concentration camp study, and then their grandkids had larger stress centers, etc. But neuroplasticity is value neutral. It can go in any direction. So you're right. Those, however many generations that is of people who had been, working on their minds and this sort of thing, I sometimes in my own language, in my own head, describe it as this sort of epigenetic tidal wave that, I showed up 2,500 years later and there's all of this good momentum. So, and to the point that in my family culture, there is this phenomena that we talk about where every generation, 1 or 2 people are born, and the older people, the ones who are deep in the practice, kind of spot them and say, you're destined for the practice. You're destined. And I was back home visiting India about 5 years old, and an uncle of mine, probably my main teacher, we were talking and he told my dad, okay, you got to start him on this practice because he's one of us.
That's extraordinary. So almost like a shamanism in the ancient kind of practice of shamanism where a child is kind of selected from the tribe and trained from a young age and initiated into that position. And I remember, I think we had a conversation about that it was your father and you were training with him, you learned to meditate with him, you learned breath work with him, you did yoga with him from a really young age, right?
Yeah, from around that 5-year-old time. I mean, it starts as appropriate for a 5-year-old, and it's mostly yoga at that point because you're not going to tell a 5-year-old kid to sit still, But then as you get a little bit more mature, a little more, you add the breath work in, which is still kind of active, but a little bit more chill. And then, when the mind is ready, you begin in very gentle doses, adding a kind of meditation practice until eventually you're doing all of them.
So I'd like to kind of take you back to little Manish. And did you find that having that training, for lack of a better word, and discipline from an early age, you had different tools as a child, as an adolescent, as a young adult, as an adult in the world that were profoundly different to your colleagues, to your friends, to your partners? Was there a noticeable and difference in the way that you approached, the tumble and the roller coaster that is life?
Yeah. In retrospect, without a doubt, yes. But at the time, I'm a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s in Southern California, and that's my focus. And what the practice looked like, we did it, quote unquote, religiously. Dad would wake me up usually around 4:30 in the morning to 6:30 was our practice time. But in some way, it was kind of like, that was that. And then there was life. And I'm sure it was.
I get that.
And it was also combined with being an immigrant family. My parents came over when they were 20 something to do their graduate degrees in California. So it was a brand new world for them. So, they call them third culture kids. You're not quite that culture. You're not that one. You're in this.
It's so true. I had the exact same experience.
Yeah. So it's a whole new thing. So you don't quite know what to make of that. And in fact, I was often translating modern Southern California for my parents.
Yes.
Because they were still back in late 60s India.
Like skate culture, surf culture, music, food. I can relate.
And all that, Indians do it so different. They don't do it, first of all, So I think in those younger years, I look back and I can see that there was almost like a Teflon coating because of the practice. But I wasn't overtly using it. It's what my dad and I did. I didn't and I had no plans, all the way through uni, to make this my life.
And you started using your training in breathwork to
Yeah,
work with opera singers
yeah,
first,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
so what did the breathwork teachings and experience that you have, how did it support them?
Yeah. So what's really interesting is in terms of singing, the best singers in the world, classical singing anyway, were these around the era of, the castrati. Have you heard of them? It
No.
was sort of maybe 1600s. The Western music used to take these young boys and castrate.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they kept on singing kind of in the female range.
Yes. Yes.
And the repertoire written for them, we look at it and the mind boggles. Like, how could they sing this stuff? And there's kind of a resurgence of it now with the Baroque resurgence in music and all that. They were the best singers and singing teachers in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
they had a sort of training of how to use your whole body, your breath, your body, and your mind. And so I grew up hearing the old yogis and monks talk about the same system. And what really surprised me, although it makes sense again in retrospect, is they both have the exact same understanding of the body. They
Oh,
use it for
interesting.
different reasons, but the yoga practice is, how do I embody myself? How do I hold myself? The breath practice, of course, and singing is an obvious correlation. Singing is just exhaling with embellishments, essentially, as is talking.
Some embellish better than others.
That is true. That is true. Some of us make pretty sounds and some of us make whatever sounds. And then, of course, the mind has everything to do with being able to do it. So what I found is that the system I had learned of body, breath, and mind was exactly what the best opera singers were doing. The same thing.
Extraordinary. And,
Yeah.
as you're talking about this philosophy and this methodology, rather, I'm thinking about, the saying that your body is your instrument, and that, as you finally tune different aspects of your physiology, your mind, your breath, which is your life force,
Yeah.
you really can make changes not only to the situation that you find yourself in, but also the situations you propel yourself into. My fascination with the way that you approach mindfulness is that you are very much neuroscience informed
Yeah.
and very heavily research based. So not only do you have this incredible heritage, which is ancient and profound and mystical in some respects,
Yeah. They're mystics for sure.
but you've overlaid it with like a deep respect and deep, fascination around science.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to share when that convergence occurred in your life and how it's elevated your practice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to think, again, this is all in retrospect, but I grew up with three big forces. I guess there was this meditation practice I did since I was a kid, and that was my dad. Then mom was a musician. And you mentioned the opera singers. So that's sort of what took me. She was in Indian music, but nonetheless, the musicality is there in her family. And then both of them were scientists. They were both immunologists / virologists. And so those three things made a big impact on the culture at home. And scientists, as well as musicians, as well as meditators, they all share something. There's a lot of crossover between those genres. A lot of great scientists are pretty decent musicians as well. And part of what it is a kind of care and attention to something. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's how you pay attention. So I grew up in a sciencey household. And I remember my books as a kid that I would just have fun looking through were big old biology textbooks from the 70s. And I used to love, like, oh, look at the development of a salamander. Look at what a cell does, whatever. That was fun, So science was in my head, and I went to uni, my first uni, for evolutionary biology, and specifically, how do brains evolve? And then I didn't actually know for sure that it was another one of those cases of these two disparate systems are actually doing the same thing. So the way this brain works, and then I look back at some of these old, what the Buddha said about how we practice and all that, and I realized, well, they're talking about the exact same thing. The exact same thing.
And did you say this to your professors? Or was this kind of an internal moment where you went, my two worlds are converging?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Totally internal at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the practice was so in its own special place. It really didn't I didn't talk to friends about it. I didn't teach people about it. It was just my private home thing, you know? But it blew my mind a little bit to see that overlap. And then something started kind of ticking over of like, these people are talking about this. And this was, in the kind of 70s, early 80s. And mindfulness was just getting some legitimacy. I think the first research started in the late 70s, kind of. And in those days, if you were doing scientific research and that, it was like career suicide, or so people said.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Professor George Paxos, who's a neuroscientist, and he mapped the human brain.
Yeah.
But he said that when he first started doing his work,
Yeah.
it was very specky.
Yeah.
And, he's now credited as being one of the most important scientists of our time.
Yeah.
And yet even his work of mapping the human brain was considered to be, in the realms of Hocus Pocus Academy early on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Exactly. And now we have these wonderful, rich dialogues between monks and scientists, and they're getting in the fMRIs. And, I just read Harvard has an Institute for the Science of Enlightenment. So the science itself is maturing. At first we looked at things like relaxation, and then we got a little deeper into neurochemicals and whatnot. And now the scientists have coined this term called an Olympic level meditator, which is essentially people like me. You've been doing it for decades and decades. And those are the people they're studying and going, how does this brain change when we do this enough? So there's this wonderful dialogue. But to swing back around to your question, at that early time, it was this private understanding. But I thought, this is important.
It's so funny that you should talk about this convergence into neuroscience and the amount of research and interest, because I have become obsessed in the past 2 years with the neuroscience of scent. I have been studying it at Olympic levels, and there's been some incredible progress in research out of the University of Geneva, where they've mapped the effect of scent to the neural pathways and how it affects mood and physicality. They scan using brain fMRI and also galvanic tests to see what the physiological states. But it all is so fascinating, and how interconnected it is. And all the things we don't know yet that we can affect. So in your practice, and I'm going to get to it in a second, the four brains that you identified. In your practice, it's through breath work, it's through movement, through visualization, through meditation. And yet fragrance can also be an incredibly effective and fast shortcut. To the limbic brain and to changing mood states, physiological states. And
Huge.
I am obsessed with this at the moment. So, but let's get back to the four brains.
Can I just speak on your scent thing for a moment? Because it's really important. And what's kind of important, I think, for, one of my things is how to make this accessible for people, and we use all of the senses, and scent comes up, especially when we do mindful eating. Right. But it comes up a lot. But I'm sure you know this, but not sure that everyone else would, that when that mammal emotional brain was first discovered decades ago, they called it the nose brain, right? Nose, like this kind of nose. They didn't know that it was about emotions at that point because they were studying rats, of course, and earlier mammals, they're very nose dominant. We're pretty much eye dominant, but older mammals, dogs, whatever, rats, are nose dominant. And so they found this part of the brain where they were using for smell. And they thought, this huge part of the brain is just for their nose. And more and more, they kind of came to realize, no, this is the entire emotional system. But scent goes straight to our emotions.
And it is the closest thing to time travel that you can have. And there is like the anchoring of memories through scent is so profound.
Absolutely.
And the development in this area is what this is going to be my thing. I've devoted myself to it. The other thing I was going to say, which is really funny, that, your life story and your, family of origin story is that my father is also a scientist. He's a geologist.
Okay.
And we emigrated in 1981 to Australia from Iran.
Oh, yeah.
And my mother was a speech pathologist,
Okay.
and so also scientifically inclined.
Yeah, very.
And Dad is a PhD geologist, and we were very much a science-oriented
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
But my father was also and is also an Olympic level meditator. So
Oh,
he
wow.
learnt transcendental meditation
Yeah.
when he was doing his master's in France
Yeah.
as a way of, because he was doing his master's in a language he didn't speak. So
Yeah.
he learnt meditation to kind of access all of his brain
Yeah.
and to also give him calm and peace, but more from a neuroscience perspective. He told me that was kind of the initial motivation for learning
Yeah. Yeah.
TM.
Yeah.
And so when my brother and I were, I think, 16 and 17, I was 17, Johnny was 16,
Yeah.
he took us to learn meditation because
Oh,
we were
wow.
going to go to university. We were doing HSC. He wanted us to have this super tool. And
Yeah.
then he also taught us Ayurveda. So we
Oh,
were learning that. And I became so fascinated with meditation that I seriously considered going to the Maharishi Mahesh
yeah.
University in Utah.
Oh,
And when the recruitment people from that university came to Australia, I met with them.
yeah.
But then I made the decision that it's beyond my level of devotion and
Yeah.
understanding and commitment to meditation.
Yeah.
But it had such a profound effect on my life, and meditation and mindfulness
Yeah.
and that link to neuroscience and optimizing what I can get out of my life
Yeah.
came from my dad too. So
Yeah.
that was
Oh,
a
that's
really
so wonderful.
nice, it's a nice story.
And I think it goes in really deep when it comes in on that vector. Like, it's not something you just found, whatever. Like, you grew up with it before it even came up.
Yes. And as when you were saying you weren't aware that it's part of your
Yeah.
decision-making process or how you approach things,
Yeah.
but it's there.
Yeah.
And I definitely know that it's just a part of me that I don't consciously think about. But, I do get a lot done, and I can move through concepts quite easily
Yeah.
and take just enough of a break in between
Yep.
to be able to go on to the next thing. And I'm almost sure that that's
Yeah.
where that came from.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it starts early, but it really just when it's done enough, and this is part of what the practice is for, is it becomes unconsciously present.
Yes.
You become unconsciously competent, right?
You
That's that
did this
final stage.
wonderful exercise at the event in
Yeah.
Brisbane. You led us through a short experience
Yeah.
to make the presence of meditation and mindfulness realistic so you
Yeah.
could demonstrate. Can you talk to us about, how what you teach as the modern monk to
Yeah.
corporates, to individuals, about mindfulness and how to bring it into every day?
Yeah. Yeah. That is a big topic.
Take
Right?
what you like.
We could talk for years. Let's just schedule the next 9 of these things or whatever.
I mean, we'll do a whole season.
That'd be awesome. There's so many rabbit holes to go down that are so, critical for us, for our functioning and all that. But essentially what I do is I think that the world out there, whether it's corporates or individuals or kids or adults, it doesn't matter. The world out there is so engaging, and there's a whole bunch of powers behind it to make it even more grabbing us.
Mhm.
It grabs us. The billboards now are all LED billboards. They're brighter than they ever were. The food is more full of things that the body wants it, And what
And
we
social
lose,
media is, of course, like in our hand, so music in our ears all
that's
the
it.
time.
The biggest thing of all. And essentially underneath that all, it's taking us away from ourselves. And even more perniciously, it's taking our capability to be with ourselves away. Not just the time and all that, but there's we inside, and the big differential, the big reason we need the practice is that's loud and easy out there. It doesn't make you work, My mind's too tired. I'll just turn on the TV. I don't have to work. You just come and soothe me.
Or doom scrolling.
Yeah, doom scrolling, same thing. And then it's
Yeah.
not even soothing. It's like making problems, But we're addicted. We're addicted to the hits.
I have a special ageless listener offer. Ready to simplify your longevity stack? Our season 11 sponsor, Melrose Future Lab, is offering ageless listeners 40% off your first time capsule order. Just use the code AGELESS at checkout. T's and C's apply. Offered valid on one-time purchases of time capsule. Only available now at melrosefuturelab.com.au.
And the issue is the thing that is the well-being, the goodness, and even deeper, the actual transformative part of us that actually changes it all, not incremental change, but a big change. Those things are subtle. And sometimes I use that metaphor. Remember the old days? We're probably old enough to remember it, but you used to take film photos and you'd have to develop your photo in a dark room. And you walk into that dark room and there's like a little red light, but you can't see anything at first, And a few minutes later, you're like, well, I can see fine. I could, write stuff or whatever. It's a bit like that. We need this practice to attune to ourselves because it's too subtle at first and we miss it really easily. And so when we build a bit of stillness, a bit of calm, a bit of focus, we start to go, oh, okay, what is going on in here? And that's already a kind of a revolution. There's something radical about that, about leaving out there, because nobody wants you to leave out there. A lot of people have a lot of money, invested in you staying out there.
You're so right, because, in the world that I inhabit, there's all this messaging about how to turn up as a founder, how to turn up as a host. Make sure you have a hook. Make sure you have something that distracts the listener, the viewer, from whatever they're wanting to do and brings them into your world. So the hook is to yank them out of whatever it is that's their priority and make you their priority. So as you're saying this, you're absolutely right. Not only am I subject to it, but I'm also part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the phrase you just said. You nailed something really deep about the practice, that you said you're subject to it. Mm-hmm. And so what's really going on? So let's say we manage to turn inwards. That's the first big shift, right? Pull our attention back to ourselves, because other people are in our heads, and their agenda is not to make us better. Their agenda is to make something for them, in fact, probably to make us want more. So slightly make us worse. So we pull it back, and then we realize once we look in here, we are subject to parts of our own mind. We are subject to our emotions. We are subject to our thoughts. And people feel that really dramatically when you're awake at 2:30 in the morning and you're thinking about that thing that's really bothering you. And you're going, I wish you would stop. I wish you would let me sleep. I wish you would think of something nice. And it doesn't. And you realize I am subject to you and I'm suffering because of it. And so our job in the practice is, how do I make you my subject? You meaning the parts of our own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'm 51 and I have some training in meditation and some practice and an awareness. But what happens if you've lost the thread of that awareness? Where do you even start? I always like to, from these episodes, I like to give something to the listener that wherever they are, they can start now.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So the first thing you have to do, so I talked about going kind of inside and looking at who's subject to whom and who's the boss of whom and all that. So, but then I said, we start out kind of out there. So what we need is a kind of base camp. It's very hard to go from out there loud and noisy to in here subtle and all that kind of stuff. So the in-between state is to be present. And it's quite simple, but again, it's a little bit boring compared to some of the stuff out there. Not always, but more often.
It is, but it is difficult because you said it before. We get our hits, the dopamine hit, right? From the flavors, from the scents, from the visuals, from the demands. So just to sit still and be present is either one, boring, or two, scary, because you have to listen to what's going on.
That's right. It's both. It's boring and scary in a weird mix. It's a weird mix. Scary, boring, doesn't feel like.
And you can imagine that most people want to run away from it. It's not something you want to run towards. If I said to you, okay, pick a box, boring and scary, or, exciting and delicious. Yeah. So what do we do to incentivize our brain to make that shift that's going to give us delicious and exciting on the other side of.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I think there's two incentives. The first one is people often come to the practice when the incentive is that it's gotten so problematic out there. And I've tried everything I can think of, every solution. I've read every book. I've done every technique, and it's no better. It might be worse. So that is an incentive to come and try something new and a little bit boring and scary, maybe, because it's bad enough. The fire is behind me, so I'm going to jump. So that's one incentive. I think the other one that comes pretty quickly, and you mentioned we did that small short session at the Ageless Radiance event in Brisbane, and that was only a few minutes, but there was a palpable change in the people in the room.
We changed the room.
Yeah.
It felt like the molecules of the air changed.
That's right. And that was only a couple of minutes we did, right? 2 or 3 minutes or five, something like that. And so I think there's an incentive in there that when you have an actual taste of what is inside us, I think of it as our birthright, this place of peace inside us and balance and focus and all that. And we can get a taste of it pretty quickly. We feel like, oh, I did calm down. I have this effect. I don't remember if it came up at the thing, but I make people yawn. Don't be surprised.
Yes.
Yeah. Did that come up? Yeah, it did.
Yes, it did. Yes.
And so that's like this physiological proof that we are calming down. These two nervous systems, I'm sure you're all over this, and as your listeners would be, but we have our fight and flight stress nervous system, and we have our rest and digest. The calm one we want to be in most of the time.
Oh, I just took a deep breath.
Yeah, exactly. The yawn is the body's expression of, oh, you just helped me downshift. So that becomes also a little bit of motivation. But you're right, it's hard. It's hard to remember, or even if you remember, to get yourself to do it. Even though it's simple, it's not easy. Well, one of the ways to get around that is I've got a morning practice that we do with a group. And that kind of community support can be really helpful.
So one thing that I mentioned in the intro is that you are one of the experts at Gwingana Lifestyle Retreat, and that's how we came to meet.
That's right.
And for me, wellness retreats have always been the hard reset that I gift myself to take that pause or that space for the regeneration. And I went to Gwingana for the first time, I think 25 years ago before it opened. So pre-opening, Tony DeLead invited some guests to do a dry run through before the retreat was open. And it was the first wellness retreat that I'd been on. And I've since practiced going yearly, either to Gwingana or if I'm overseas, and I take my daughter now to reset and to relearn habits and to sit quietly and in a state of boring rest sometimes. So no phones, no coffee, no alcohol, no distraction, just me, thoughts, nature, exercise, simpler food. And you being at Gwingana, I'm sure you facilitated literally thousands of rest and retreats for people who are seeking that pause or that reset. What do you see as the thing that makes that click happen in the guests' mind, where they go, yes, this boring and scary, the payoff on this investment is so profound. I want it. I actually want it. Not just I'm going to tolerate it, but I'm seeking it out.
So the beautiful thing about going on a retreat like that is the environment is so supportive.
Yes,
but the so actual true. Environment. Exactly. You're already set up to win. If we spent more time with our tree ancestors and our cloud ancestors and whatnot, we would learn something by being next to them. And so that's what's happening there, as well as all the other, nicenesses and the food and all that kind of stuff helps support it. But I think it's really when people start to get a taste of what they are. That's what we've kind of left. It's just me. And there's a little bit of like, I got to do some work to reconnect with me, but there's something amazing about me. And I have been living without that for a while. I mean, that's why I got myself all stressed out and all this and that. There's some part of me that I've been disconnected from. And that's where all the goodness is. And so when they start to and so I'm standing there, a little bit of an example of that. So that helps. My presence makes people yawn sometimes. I've been described as human Valium before, And so,
I can, I can attest to that. That was the feedback from you being in the room. As I said before, there was a molecular change in the
yeah,
state of the
yeah,
room from your presentation and that exercise that we did. And
yeah,
some people are a tonic for jangled nerves, and you are
yeah,
just that person.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's the presence in the room. And then I think once there's a little taste of it, something inside, it's reconnecting with something with us. Often the issue is in between that deep goodness and where we live is a whole bunch of, you used the word trauma earlier, is a whole bunch of stuff. And that's what's scary. And the problem is, do you know this book? I sometimes quote it. It's one of our main books in our group. We're going on a bear hunt. Do you know that book?
The kids' book.
Yeah. We're going on a bear hunt. Oh, we're not scared, blah, blah. And they always encounter some difficulty like, oh no, squishy, slimy mud. And then there's this refrain where we can't go around it. We can't go over it. We're going to have to go through it. Right?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Mind blown. Yeah, absolutely. It's somatic healing.
That's it. The whole practice is somatically based. The whole thing.
Goodness.
I got goosebumps again from your thing.
Yeah.
But
got
we
it.
have to go through what's in between where we are and this deep innate goodness of ours, our birthright. And going through is scary and hard at first. But what you realize is the moment you turn inwards, and we can even think of this deep part of us often as the young part of us. Often for people, it's quite common that all that trauma in between started really early, with some kind of coping strategy that only a young mind could understand. They didn't understand the whole world. They did something to get through something, and that becomes a kind of culture of mind. So that was just struggling to make it, and here you are, you made it. But there's some tension in there. So I think, to come back to your question, when people start to turn inwards, that deep part of us that's been waiting for us, it knows you're there, and it starts to move towards you. And yes, you're going to have to go through, but there's someone, your allies.
Do you feel that there is, in your experience at Gwingana, in your practice, in working with people, that there is this reawakening around midlife? Or do you think that I'm just living in this bubble and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy? But I am so aware that around, just after that 40th birthday, and definitely from perimenopause for women and, that the 50th birthday celebration, a pilot light comes alive and it's like, if this is it, I don't want it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's this renewed investigation as to what all the possibilities are for transformation, change, recalibration, a return to self. The willingness to look at, as you said, the inner child or the childhood maladaptations that then became personalities and coping mechanism. Is it true? Like, is there in neuroscience or in spiritual law, is there a moment in midlife that does push us over the edge?
You are absolutely right. Your intuition and everything you're feeling is right on. So there is a field, it's crossed over with neuroscience, but they're calling it adult human psychological development. Largely coming out of this lab at Harvard, actually, but all over now. Adult psychological development, years ago when we were kids, it didn't exist, right? It didn't exist. There was like childhood mind development, but by the time we got to 20s or whatever, they thought it was done. These researchers, just in the last couple of decades, were following a large cohort of people. And so, you talked about I have these 4 brains, right? We'll kind of get to that. Those 4 brains are our evolutionary steps, but they're also our psychological developmental steps. So the first one is this body. We come out and a baby is just about their body. Right? And in fact, like we said earlier, they are subject to their body. They can't control it, right? You got to wear diapers. You can't stand, whatever. As you develop, your body becomes your subject. I can control it now. And then I level up and I become subject to my emotions. And then in adolescence, I'm meant to learn to do something with those. And then as an adult, I become subject to my thoughts. Oh my God, I thought this and then I went and do this. I'm not the boss of them. So we get to be the boss of them. Most adults in the world are either at that emotional level or that mental thinking level in how they make meaning of the world. The researchers were really surprised to find that around midlife, a whole different way of making meaning and a neural wiring came on board. This prefrontal cortex starts to make meaning. And I call it the human awareness mind. And they're calling it the adaptive mind or the self-transforming mind. This is the one, and I use that phrase, get up on the balcony. This is the one that goes, you know what? I'm a whole different way. And what I can do is I can step back, and now the thinking is my subject, the emotions and the body and the whole world. That mind never showed up in the research before middle age, and it only showed up in a percentage of people. But I see this practice as all about developing that perspective.
How exciting
Yeah.
to think that not only can you train hard, change your life partner, there are so many external things you can reclaim and change at midlife when you become truly the boss of you.
Yes, exactly that.
But now there's support, research support that your brain can and will level up as well. So not only do we not, we're not destined for cognitive decline. We're not predestined for cognitive decline, but rather there is an opportunity for a wildly intelligent new brain to emerge.
That's it. And it's a critical intelligence the world needs. So there's interesting writing around this. And I do some work in the business transformation space, working with adaptive leaders and all that. And so we look at something called technical problems versus complex problems. And a technical problem is like your car breaks and someone knows the answer. I might not, but someone does. A complex problem is like, this doesn't seem to work. All my solutions don't work. Like dieting is a complex problem. 90% of them fail. Not because the instruction.
And that's why the GLP-1 revolution has been phenomenal, because it's a hormone and it affects the way the brain works.
Exactly.
So it's bypassing the willpower and just the biological, calories in, calories out.
That's right. Exactly. So it's a complex problem. It's hard to solve, and climate change is a complex problem. So the world is full of these business decisions in this environment are complex problems. The mind that's in that thinking or emotional level cannot handle complexity. It needs certainty. And if it doesn't have it, it gets stressed. This new mind that comes on around middle age in some people, but it can be grown in everyone, is a mind of complexity. It can handle nuance. It can handle dichotomy. It can handle two things together that shouldn't be. And so what I'm saying is that it's the only mind that can solve our modern complex problems. We have to level up to make it okay, not just inside our minds, but in our world.
But it needs rest and recuperation and some techniques of support to function at its best.
Absolutely. In fact, the stress that we have is totally the opposite direction. It won't let you level up. It keeps you locked in at this lower levels of meaning making and thinking.
Now, let's go back to the four brains, because I find this really fascinating. I'd love for you to share more insight on that. Yeah,
I'd love to. Can I just show a little hand model real quick?
Please.
So this is a little. My hand is up here right now, and it's a model of the brain. It's not mine. I've taken it. I think I first heard it from Dan Siegel at UCLA. And so this forearm is a spinal cord, and we got four brains that evolved from ancient to newest. The oldest one, the heel of my hand, is our reptile brain, and it runs our body, keeps us alive. Mindfulness uses this brain to help manage the next few, because the next few are out of control. This one, though, is a reliable, stable workhorse. Exactly. Yeah. And so then the next brain above, my thumb tucks in, is limbic system, mammals, emotions, or scent, as we talked about earlier, the smell. And so a little bit newer, when we look at a brain, we're seeing this now called the cortex, primate brain, but I call it the monkey mind. This is our thinking. Of course I'm simplifying, but we got to simplify to talk about it.
I love
This
it.
is her thinking mind. This is Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am, right? And the Enlightenment in Europe and all that stuff. This is all from here. And then this final brain, the one we're talking about of that transformation place, my fingernails up here, right in the forehead, you know, where Indian women put their bindis, right?
Yes.
Or if you do an Indian
third
ceremony,
eye.
third eye, same thing. It's a
Mhm.
prefrontal cortex, and it's saying we want to live from here and make meaning from here. So these are these four minds, and they're all going at the same time, like a kind of a piece of music. And our job is, how do I become the listener of them rather than, you know, I call it down on the dance floor, right? You get involved in the dance and I'm thinking and feeling and doing this and that, but rather get up on that balcony and watch the dance.
And in your practice, you say that there are a few shortcuts to getting up on that balcony
Yeah.
and getting off the hectic dance floor. Although I
Yeah.
do like the dance floor, I have to say.
Oh, no,
I'm a
we're
fan.
never leaving the dance floor. We're never leaving. What
We're
we
never
want,
leaving the dance floor.
no,
But
no,
what
we're
we
never
want to
leaving.
do is maybe dance on the table so that we've got a bit
We
of...
want to know we're dancing. We want to watch ourselves dancing.
I got it. I love it. So breathwork is a great pathway to that. Meditation is a great pathway
Yep.
to that.
Yeah.
Yoga and
Yeah.
is a great pathway to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other, like, when I want to talk about meditation, a lot of people immediately shut off. They say, I tried it,
Yeah.
doesn't work for me, I'm not into it.
Totally.
Give me another technique.
Yeah.
So breathwork is often good for people who are reticent to try meditation in
Yeah.
whatever format they learnt before. Yoga is often an excellent, you know, reintroduction to body and
Yeah.
breath and mindfulness. Are there
Yeah.
any other techniques that you recommend, or that you know that people who are a little bit slow with
Yeah.
the uptake on
Totally.
yoga or meditation could
Totally.
try?
Totally. And so even with those traditional ones, yoga, breathwork, meditation, I think I come at a little bit differently, more accessibly maybe, but I also like inventing practices. You know, like a jazz
Yes.
musician, when you get really good, you just start improvising. And so one that I think has been a real popular one with new people is I invented one I call mindfulness,
Oh,
right? As in
we can
wine.
get behind this. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
here
exactly.
we are.
Exactly. Let's put this out in the world. And so, you know, if you go to a wine tasting event, it's a tremendously mindful experience, right? The quality of attention you're paying.
Yes.
And so, you know, you smell it, you look at it, you taste it carefully and all that sort of thing. So
And then you can identify, it's almost like fragrance as well. Like when you're mindfully experiencing, you identify the notes.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah, I like
That's it. And one of the signs that I talk about, how you know when you've engaged in something with your attention, is that where you started and where you go changes in the resolution. Like it starts with like 2 pixels or something, like, oh, drink a wine. Oh, it's like that. But as you pay attention, like, oh no, wait, there's more going on here. I can notice more. The moment you start is important. That's a critical thing because now you're in the game. But then when you notice, oh, it opened up to me, something revealed itself to me, then you're like, now I am in. Now the magic has started, right? My awareness changed my world. And
So
that's
as a practice,
yeah,
can you apply that to anything
anything.
as a mindfulness practice?
Yeah, that's it. And so mindfulness is meant to be how we live. And so the things that make it mindfulness are, one is we're on the balcony. So when we're on the dance, we've lost ourselves. We're engaged in it, whatever. And
Yes,
sometimes
we have.
sometimes that's okay and important, you know? There's some things you just want to be there. But really, you're practicing mindfulness if you know you're doing it. And then it's that quality of attention you bring to anything you do. And that quality of attention that is, the old yogis and monks use this word penetrating. And that's sort of what I mean by it shows you more. There's always more. And the beauty is, the magic is the more, in doesn't matter what, will always eventually take you to the root of yourself.
And that's
Nowhere
the end
else.
destination.
Always. That's the end destination to every avenue of inquiry, as long as you're finding more.
If you've given us some great tools that we can try ourselves, the final thing, and before we wrap up, is you talk about radical self-responsibility.
Yeah,
And I think that that's been the underlying theme to this conversation
yeah,
is, recognizing who you are, committing to who you are,
yeah,
taking accountability for your past, where you're at now and where you want to be.
yeah,
Can you give us, in parting, what radical responsibility might look like in
yeah,
practice
yeah,
and why it's very worthwhile
yeah,
looking at
yeah.
it?
Yeah, I think it's the critical sort of idea behind the practice is that nobody can get in your own mind. Nobody can get in anyone else's mind. We all have one, and it's only ours. Everyone else is external. So children are different. Children, the caregivers are meant to help them do this. But by the time we're adults, we have to do this. And if anything is going wrong in here, there is a natural human tendency to blame something out there. Well, I'm upset
Yes.
because of the traffic. I'm like this because of my mom. I'm like this because of whatever. Radical personal responsibility says it doesn't matter what's happening out there. It could be this or that. It just doesn't matter. Your job is to look inside, get on that balcony and say, what is my body doing? Let me make some choices. What is my emotional self? These are these four minds. What are my emotions doing? This is on me. I can't, the radical part is I can't say, but it's because the emotions are in me and they're hurting me and nobody can get in there to put out this fire. So I have to, or it's just going to burn, And the same thing with the thinking, I'm responsible for all this. I'm not responsible for out there or what happens to me, right? Largely, but I'm responsible for how I make meaning of it, which is how I feel and think about it, and then what I do. And if we get this on board and we take our responsibility, and if enough people did that, doesn't even have to be everyone, the world would be a different place.
Manish, this was such a beautiful conversation. And I don't know if they told you, but I'm coming to Gwingana next month for the neuroscience
Oh,
retreat.
I heard that. Yeah.
I can't wait to see you, and I can't wait to put some of these ideas into practice with you, because I'm like really committed to deepening my mindfulness practice, and you would 100% the source of inspiration since we met in April. So I'm delighted to share you with more people via the podcast, and I can't wait to see you at Gwingana. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
That's been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel, sign up for our free newsletter, and consider leaving a review and rating it. This really helps the channel grow and reach new audiences.